Like most of the events the John Adams Institute organizes, we will have a debate, a public interview, after Mrs. Wolf talk. And I would like to encourage you to take part in the discussion as soon as Mrs. Smulders allows you to. There is at least one microphone in the middle, and I don't know if we need it, but if we ask you, and please use it, because then everybody can hear you. Before I will ask Beatrijs to come and take the floor, I would like you to ask to switch off your mobile phones, refrain from smoking, and I have to say we don't have an intermission tonight. We will approximately close at 9:40. Both ladies, I was hoping that they could do book signing, but I'm not sure if Beatrijs' books are here, but at least Naomi Wolf's are here. But before we come to that part, book signing, I will be back to close the evening and give you some more information on next programs. Beatrijs, can I ask you to come? Thank you.
Well, I'm very honored to be here tonight and to may introduce Naomi Wolf and to be present and help launch her wonderful book. Because in this book that's being launched tonight, actually, it came out today. Naomi Wolf has written a very personal reflection about her experiences with pregnancy and birth in the United States. And a part of the experience, she describes with sharp observation all the misconceptions and all the lies and misinformation actually she was confronted with during this period. The misinformation given by books, by doctors, by midwives, and she also describes how disempowering actually the effect was on her, and also after the birth. Well, the Dutch birth culture differs greatly from the American birth culture. And the best way to show you what I mean is to tell you a short birth story. It's the birth story of Lisa. Lisa, she's an American woman, and she had her first child in New York. And she really wanted to have a natural childbirth. And she asked for it with her nurse midwife, with her doctor. But she ended up with an epidural, with a C-section. After the C-section and sexual cesarea, she had fever, and her baby had epidural fever, what often happens after an epidural. Then the baby was taken away, and she was really traumatized by the whole event. After that, she came home, breastfeeding didn't work out, and she got depressed. And it took her about 6 years actually to recover and to be brave enough to get pregnant again. And then she met a Dutch woman, and they became friends. And actually, she decided to come to Holland, and she was determined to have a home birth in Holland. And there she came to our practice, and I was there, and she said, "I really want to go Dutch. I really want to experience a normal birth. So if I'm in labor and I really beg you for an epidural, please treat me like you would treat a Dutch woman. You really have to promise." And so I promised. But on the day she got into labor, I was not on call, but my friend, my colleague, was on call. And she went over there to her hotel, and there she was. And she was in excruciating pain and fear. And she was really, actually, she said, "Oh, well, let's forget about the whole Dutch birth." I was totally wrong. Please give me my epidural now. And let's go to the hospital and leave this miserable hotel. And so the midwife said, "Just settle down," and gave her a massage and helped her breathing. And she said, "Well, actually, you're okay. I mean, in the beginning of labor, the endorphins are not flowing through your bloodstream yet, and you have to get into labor a little bit more to cope with the pain, and you're fine. And so she helped her coping the pain and advised her to go under the shower. She sent the nervous husband for a walk in the park, and she said, well, now you're under the shower, I'm going to leave you. And the woman, she just couldn't believe her ears. She said, are you going to leave me? Are you out of your mind? And she said, yes, that's what I would do with a Dutch woman. It takes a few hours, I'm going to do some visits, and I will come back to you as soon as you call me. So the midwife left, and left the woman all by herself under the shower. And then, under the shower, all of a sudden, the body of the woman took over, and she got enormous contractions. The endorphins came, and 2 hours later, she had the urge to push. And she called the midwife. The midwife came in, and there was this wonderful squatting birth, and this wonderful baby of 8 pounds, Dutch pounds, came out. And she was thrilled to bits after the birth. Of course, the pain was over. And then she said, well, to the midwife, something really funny happened. You left me, and I was sitting under the shower. And all of a sudden, I realized, well, she left me. I might as well be okay. I might as well be in a very good condition. And that gave her a relaxation, and then her body took over, not her mind. And from the moment her body took over, actually she just came into this trance and finally gave birth. And so she said it was this very strange feeling that I all of a sudden had confidence, while at the same time the pain was still very agony. But I had this confidence all of a sudden, this feeling of autonomy that she could do it herself on her own steam. And I tell you the story because when I read Naomi's book, it confirmed my ideas and fears, what is going on in the United States. And the whole obstetrical system is totally medicalized, and the women, they have no choice whatsoever. There is a monopoly position of the hospital. And when women enter the hospital, they have to follow the hospital procedures. And everyone, it's totally institutionalized. You don't have any chance, actually, if you really want to have a natural birth. On the moment when you're in total agony and they offer you an epidural, you're just absolutely condemned to take it. And the results of this system are dramatic. There's a very high number of C-sections in the United States, very high number of unnecessary interventions, without improvement of results. And the worst of all is a lot of a high percentage of postnatal depression. But I want to make it short, because I really want to give Naomi the floor. But the crux of tonight is why is this difference between cultures, and what happened to women in the United States? The women are not different; they are not less emancipated, but something different is there in their history, in their lives. Why they give over their autonomy and why they let themselves disempower in such a system. And so this is what will be the debate. And I can see Naomi can hardly wait to take the floor. But I want to say, Naomi, that I think you wrote a very important book. Really, it is a very important book because it actually it is. I think it's a big support for American women to really become more aware of their possibility to really empower themselves by motherhood, and and to help them to actually heal themselves, so that they can really be themselves in the whole process. And at the same time, for Dutch women, it's a warning. It's a warning to look at the Dutch system and to really realize, to keep what we have, but also to be very critical to our system. Because also in the Dutch system, there are disadvantages, and there's lack of flexibility, and there should be a choice of women, a real choice. So I think, Naomi, come to speak, and after that we have a discussion. Okay?
Piece of phallic technology. I will master it. Beatrijs Smulders has been a beacon of pioneering to advance and improve the Dutch system, as well as very helpful in arranging to teach the advantages of the Dutch system to other countries that are not as enlightened as your wonderful country. Having said that, one of the exciting things about being here tonight is that, and one of the reasons I think tonight really kind of manifests why the John Adams lecture series is so important both for Holland and for the United States and other English-speaking countries, is that it's a chance for us to really be interlocutors to one another and to really challenge one another, as well as celebrate the points of common ground. So, as Beatrice told you so eloquently, my book Misconceptions is about what goes wrong in the American birth experience, but it's also about the common feelings that women of many countries in the industrialized West, including, I'm hearing, many Dutch women, also share as we make that journey through pregnancy. And it's fascinating to me that Beatrice and I share so many goals in terms of childbirth for women. At the same time, we were virtually at daggers drawn in a respectful, affectionate way, not 5 minutes before we arrived here on the podium, because of one point of disagreement about childbirth, which we can get into later. But what's so fascinating about childbirth, because it has to do with the essence of women, and because it's such a hot-button issue, because of how we feel about mothers, and because of how we feel about women's sexuality, and because it's ultimately about the control of women, or the liberation of women, is that ideology operates no matter what the system is that women are giving birth in. And what's fascinating about ideology is that it is invisible to the person living inside the ideology. Therefore, fascinatingly to me, as an American woman, when Beatrice said in her introduction, how did American women disempower themselves? My hackles, of course, rose, and I thought, wait a minute, we didn't disempower ourselves. We have a proud tradition and history of feminists fighting for the right to a more holistic birth. And I would say that the difference between your system and ours, among many, is that you had a government early on that endorsed midwifery because you have a more socialist tradition, whereas our government didn't get involved in midwifery, and we have a more profit-driven medical tradition. And so I would say the heroic women are probably the same on both sides of the Atlantic. We just have some tougher structures to deal with. But I would also say that fascinatingly to me, apart from the argument that we got into right before we came on board, when Beatrice said, and she left the woman in labor alone, to me, who was horrified by that? Hands. And how many of you are Americans who are horrified by that? Interesting. Isn't that fascinating? And are any Dutch women upset by that point in the story where she said she left the woman in labor alone? 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is a fascinating moment of transparent ideology. You're telling me about your system, and I'm thinking, what? What? She left the woman in labor alone? And, of course, to all of you Dutch women, many of you who have given birth and been presumably left alone in labor, you think, what's the big deal, right? So I'm just curious, where was the Dutch woman who raised her hand about, oh, here you are. Why were you concerned about the woman being left alone in labor?
The labor was induced in my case, so I have a different experience. But I thought women should share that experience, so I'm looking at it from a feminist point of view. Right. Leaving her alone, to me, has a connotation of, not sharing.
Right. Very interesting. And I'm sure there are completely opposite points of view in the same hall. But let me just cut to the chase, and then I'll make my presentation, and we can get into it. In my book, I make the case that there are ideologies that coerce women. The ideology that I write about in the first third of the book is an American high-tech interventionist ideology that Beatrice is absolutely right to attack. But I also attack in the book, respectfully, ideologues on the other side of the spectrum who insist or demand that women give birth at home if they're not comfortable with it, or who insist or demand that women not get pain medication if they truly cannot bear the pain, or insist and demand that women breastfeed a certain amount of time if that is really not what's right for them and what's right for their family or what's right for their lives. And my essential conclusion is that the control of women, takes many shapes. And what I've heard from Dutch women is not, oh my God, they processed me through this system and they gave me an epidural. Of course, you don't have that experience. But what I've heard from Dutch women is, I got nonstop harassment about breastfeeding, and I had a really hard time with breastfeeding. Or, I was begging for pain medication. I was begging for pain relief, and my caregivers really encouraged me to keep a stiff upper lip. Or it's not socially acceptable here to complain if you find it overwhelming or if you feel you really can't do it. And, cultures have different inheritances. Americans whine too much. I grant you that. Maybe the Dutch don't whine quite enough when it comes to the experience of women in childbirth or the difficulties of motherhood. We can get into that later, but I'm intrigued that Dutch women are responding just as powerfully as American women have to the notion that there are expectations around motherhood that feel imposed on them, that don't give them the freedom to say, that's not quite right for me. Now, having thrown that out there, let me just briefly summarize what my book is about. There's a wonderful African women's saying. The saying is, pregnancy and birth are like crossing a narrow bridge. People can walk you to the bridge, they can greet you on the other side, but you walk that bridge alone. And Misconceptions is about the journey of pregnancy and childbirth and new motherhood. And it's about, the subtitle is Truth, Lies, and the Unexpected on the journey to motherhood. And so it's about the things they don't tell you on the way to childbirth and on the way to becoming a mother. Let's start with truth. One myth about motherhood in Holland, as well as in the United States, generally in the West, is that all of us who are women just are naturally, biologically primed to become mothers, and that our maternality is this automatic kind of flowering of our essence, and that motherhood is sort of depicted like a Hallmark card. It's just this thing that you do, like, cows calving in the spring, or, fruit falling from a tree, it's just like, and that it makes you, your maternality makes you at one with the earth and the seasons and the stars and the planktons and the rutabaga and, the tides and little animals. So what that mythology does is that it doesn't leave room for the blissful and sometimes lonely the joyful and sometimes challenging, the ecstatic and sometimes terrifying real-life experience of pregnancy and motherhood. And so let's start with one of the truths. So you get this sense that when you're pregnant, you just sort of bloom. And you are not told, some of the things I experienced when I was first pregnant, that at some point you think, oh my God, there's someone else inside of me. It's like, it's an alien. You know? And this bizarre, I mean fabulous, but bizarre feeling that there is another being taking over. And, you know, at first you kind of have mixed feelings about that, you know? Especially when you read books like What to Expect When You're Expecting, which I'm glad does not have a big audience in the Netherlands. But you have other taboos in the Netherlands. In America, you can't have even one glass of wine in case you become an insane alcoholic and, you know, destroy the baby, God forbid, right? Because they don't trust women to be grown-ups and have a drink once in a while in moderation, which there's no risk about. I gather in Holland you can't have raw meat. I mean, it's a whole other set of taboos. Cheese issues, egg issues, raw egg issues, yeah. Don't do outdoor gardening type stuff. With us, it's kitty litter. You're not supposed to touch kitty litter. So these different taboos. No one prepared me for what happens at 7 months when I, as a feminist, discovered I had turned into kind of a tank, right? And, you know, small Land Rover. And I realized that when I was crossing a busy street, I wanted to lean on my husband's arm, that I was dependent. And you can imagine what this did to my consciousness as a feminist, to realize I am dependent. I'm not Superwoman, able to take over the world in quite the same way I thought I would be. No one prepared me for the fact that at 4 months, I'm not being chronological here, but when I saw the sonogram of the baby, a lifetime of rhetoric about abortion rights lurched into a changed position for me. I am pro-choice. I've always been pro-choice. I will always be pro-choice. But I realized at that moment that we shouldn't ask women to deny that the fetus is something in order to let them stand up for their right to choose when they were going to have a baby. And finally, at 8.5 months, no one told me that my brain that I would be essentially brainwashed with chemicals, and that, you know, your brain literally changes when you're pregnant, gets bathed in these hormones, making you girlier than you've ever been before, or probably will ever be again. And so, you know, suddenly I didn't want to be involved in debate. I didn't want to be involved in politics. You know, I wanted to sit on the sofa and eat. You know? And, you know, every time the long-distance phone card ad would come on, I would weep, even when it was the same ad over and over. I would weep every single time. You know? And, you know, small animals were not safe from my embraces. You know? And that, of course, you know, ebbs that hormonal bath of niceness, and you go back to normal, but no one prepared me for that. Moving into the lies part, and this is the part that's fabulous sort of horror reading, escapist horror reading for Dutch women, and all too relevant for American women, is the center of the book, which is about the birth experience itself. As Beatrice noted, in America, not in Holland, when you go to give birth, some very awful things are likely to happen to you. In my case, well, first you go to talk to your obstetrician, and you say, I just read this book that says in Holland they have a 7% episiotomy rate. For those of you, I welcome the men here. I'm glad you're here. It shows a lot of courage and stamina. For those of you who don't know what an episiotomy is, it is an incision into the perineum, okay, to get the baby out more easily. And I said, in Holland, they do perineal massage, you know, with olive oil. I had read, I don't know who had the olive oil treatment here, but yes, no, yes. Yeah, oh, great. What, grapeseed oil? Oh, that sounds good. And I said, that sounds, you know, and they have a 7% episiotomy rate. And my obstetrician said, well, honey, and this is a woman, you know, believe me, 90% of women in our practice have episiotomies because, she said, You would rather have a straight, sterile cut than a jagged, bloody-edged tear to the anus, she said. And I'm like, you're right! You're right! Now, later, when I'd done even more research and I knew exactly what perineal massage was with olive oil and that it was, really effective, I tried to get another obstetrician in my second pregnancy to do it for me, and he acted like I was asking him to do some weird sexual thing with a condiment. It's like, you want me to do what? But, okay, so that's episiotomies. And in fact, 60% to 70% of women in America have episiotomies. And these are not... You read What to Expect, it says it's a little minor cut. In fact, it's a major incision to muscle. And it can lead to pain in intercourse up to 7 years after. It's one of the most traumatic things about childbirth in the United States, many women find. Epidurals. Beatrice mentioned epidurals, how common they are. And when you go to give birth in America, you're encouraged to lie down on your back, which... no one tells you is the most excruciating position in which to labor, with your feet up, which forces the baby to try to move up the birth canal against gravity, right? Not surprisingly, that then leads to this whole domino effect. The baby can't get out, you're on a monitor, you're lying down, the monitor is showing fetal distress, you're more likely to have surgical interventions, and 1 woman in 3 in the United States is likely to have a cesarean section. As a consequence, they don't tell you that a new industry has arisen to make it look like you're getting a holistic birth experience. I saw a midwife. I couldn't find out that she was the handmaiden of the doctor that she worked with. She had no equal power the way midwives and doctors do it in Holland, or close to equal power, although they're grossly underpaid, and we'll get into that. There are new... there are birthing classes that your hospital tells you to go to. They don't tell you that you're being taught to be a quiescent, passive consumer of their high-tech birth because they don't want you doing what's good for women to do in birth, which is squat, grunt, pull on the sheets, pull on the medical staff, pull on your husband or boyfriend or girlfriend, right? Make guttural tiger noises. They don't want you making guttural tiger noises in the hall in the hospital. It's not convenient for them. No one told us that there are even new fake birthing centers, beautiful alternative birthing center, big sunny room, big double bed on the top floor of a hospital. I thought, I want to give birth there. They market this. In fact, only 2 out of 8 women who tries to give birth there, I found out later, interviewing people on background who wouldn't be named, are able to give birth because it's a fake lure. Because the minute they can say, something's wrong, you go down to the medieval torture chamber of the high-tech birth. So these are very scary things that are happening in the United States, leading to the highest rate of cesarean section in the developed world, and as Beatrice mentioned, the highest rate of postpartum depression in the developed world as well. And I'm sorry to say I had 2 cesarean sections, trying my best to have an alternative birth, and I'll never know if they were necessary or not. Thank God I've got 2 healthy children, but I'll never know if I could have had 2 healthy children and actually have had the experience of giving birth. And I suffered from postpartum depression. No one tells you, and this is where we get into the unexpected. So you give birth and you go home. And this is where the Dutch experiences are similar to the American ones from what women have told me. And you're supposed to just bond with your baby immediately. You're supposed to be in just a complete haze of joy and fulfillment. You're supposed to be able to handle the baby all by yourself, of course, with loving support from your partner, maybe your extended family if you're lucky. In Holland, you're fortunate enough to have a home visit a week after you go home. That's great. We don't get that. What they don't tell you in Holland or in the United States, probably, because there are many social taboos against this, is that it's very likely that you won't bond immediately with your baby. And in fact, if you have an epidural or a cesarean section, the drugs they use interfere with the bonding chemicals that would trigger the dance between baby and mother. So there you are, 2 weeks after giving birth, and you're thinking, I don't feel the way I'm supposed to feel. What's wrong with me? But this can happen whether you've had the drugs or not. And it's a very shameful thing in both of our cultures to have those feelings. Dutch men, as I understand it, get 3 days off to go home to be with the baby, unless they, which is very unusual, take the 3-month off option. Is that correct? Yeah? Okay. So my husband was able to take a 2-week vacation to stay home out of his vacation time. So then in Holland, maybe 3 days. In America, maybe 2 weeks after you give birth, your partner goes back to work. It's very likely, yes? Okay. So it's right at that point that your hormones drop. And your hormones drop right at the moment that you need nurturing and help the most intensively. And you're alone. In your culture, like mine, women are expected to be hands-on all day long with a baby. This is a very historically recent and culturally deviant expectation. In most human societies, still, and for most of recorded history, everyone knew that it's nuts to expect one woman to be primarily responsible for a baby for most of the day. In many, many cultures that I've looked at, from Latin America to Asian cultures to Arab cultures and many others all over the world, there's this 40-day period where you go home with your baby and you're just expected to kind of hang out in bed, nurse, and fall in love with your baby. And the other women in the village come and baby you because they know, as my book put it, and many women have told me this almost brought them to tears, a new mother needs a mother. She needs to be mothered. And so the women come and they feed you soup, interestingly, cross-culturally chicken soup. They make sure you don't have to do any housework. They take care of your other children. All you're supposed to do is fall in love with your baby. Now, in our cultures, that's not true. And it's not surprising that your society and mine has high rates of postpartum depression, and in these other societies, they have other problems, but that is almost unheard of. Another unexpected thing, which Dutch women have told me is very common for them as well as for American women, we are of a generation, women my age here and women younger, who expected that we would be rewriting the contract in the family when we had a baby. Meaning, our mother's generation knew that, you have a baby and you go home and things aren't fair, right? I mean, it wasn't so great that they knew that. They were on Valium and it ushered in the second wave of feminism and the feminine mystique, but they knew it. It wasn't a shock. We were raised to expect to be equal. We were equal in school. We were equal in the workplace, largely. We fell in love with guys who said that they believed in equality, many of us. Guys are supposed to believe in equality now. Then the baby comes. And what the data shows in Holland as well as in the United States is when the baby comes, those guys, those feminist guys, do 4 minutes more childcare a day than their sexist traditionalist peers. And that, this is not evil on their parts. It's more than their dads did. But what this means is that many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Dutch women, like American women, find themselves, after the baby's birth, stunned to discover that their egalitarian partnership is not so egalitarian, that they're living their mother's life in many ways. And the last part of the book is a very painful in some ways, but very liberating, I've been told also, deep exploration of what happens to love and sex in those conditions of surprising, sudden inequality. And you want to know what happens to love and sex? I'll tell you. I'll tell you what happens to love. Women go through a deep upheaval to discover that their best friend isn't going to play it fair. And there's this deep renegotiation of women's expectation of what love is going to be to them. Painful. Deep. Also, sex. How do women protest these conditions that they find themselves in? it comes out of the sex life. Women withhold. All the women I interviewed said, oh yeah, we're not having sex. And if you dig a little deeper, it's because they're angry. And if you dig deeper still, they're angry because they're the ones who have to remember to pack the diapers. They're the ones who have to remember to say, get the formula. They're the ones who da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And the guy will do it if he's told to, right? But he won't just do the damn thing himself, right? And so the bad news is that this means that women withhold sexually. The good news is if men are concerned that this is happening in their personal lives, the best thing you need to know is if you want to totally revitalize your sex life with your wife after having had a baby or your partner, all you have to do is the dishes and other forms of childcare and housework, because data show that women find men doing housework and childcare erotic. And on that happy note, so the last part of the book is an exploration of the unexpected impact of the baby and inequality on otherwise equal relationships. And also empathically looking at it from the man's point of view too, because men really need to liberate each other and need social policies and government policies, as do women, before we can really have conditions of true equality in the home. So that's the book in a nutshell. And looking at it sort of more positively, in conclusion, before I take your questions and I get to talk to Beatrice more and listen to Beatrice and listen to all of you, the good news is that Holland exists in a way. I mean, I have heard plenty of stories of what women are upset about or having trouble with in terms of social expectations of motherhood in Holland. At the same time, it is a beacon of light, it is, that you have the birthing system that you do. I was at a Dutch birth a couple of nights ago, thanks to Beatrice and Marianne, the wonderful midwife I was observing. And the woman I was watching was having the very same medical experience I'd had. The baby's heart was slowing. But the mood in the room could not have been more different from the mood of tension and fear, not only on my part, but on part of my medical professionals who were faced with career-ending litigation if something went wrong with the baby. And it's very likely, I don't know what happened to that baby, but that she eventually delivered vaginally instead of being shunted off into surgery. And, what was really beautiful was that everyone was having a cup of tea and laughing while the birth was happening. That's what birth should be, or what labor should be. And finally, on another note, your government passed a law that made it more possible for people to take a 4-day work week. And you have a lot more revolutionizing to do. Something that worries me is that I hear that feminism is a dirty word in Holland, as it has been recently in the United States, and that there's a new generation waiting to be turned into feminists, or to call themselves feminists here in Holland, just as there has been in the United States. But I just want to conclude by saying I'm thrilled to have the chance to have this conversation between countries. I think we need more and more of it as women. And I just want to thank you for being an example to my nation and for doing the work that all of you are doing. Thank you very, very much. So I think we'd love to take questions, right? Or do we start with...
I start with one question to you, and
Okay.
then
And I start with I'll follow up with a question to you.
yeah?
Yeah. Okay. Can everyone see?
Yeah, my first question is, what would you think would be the most important thing to make a change in obstetric care in the United States to actually support women and empower them during the whole process of pregnancy and birth and the period after? What would be the most important asset?
Right. It's a great question. Unfortunately, I'll be brief. There are 4 pieces of the answer. The first thing we need, weirdly enough, is tort reform. Right now, everyone is petrified because tort reform means that you can't sue everyone all the time no matter what, right? Right now, if you're a nurse, believe it or not, in a hospital, and nurses make, practically working class salaries. They're not highly paid. If a baby is born and something's wrong with the baby, not only can the parents sue the nurse as well as the doctor, right, personally, but the baby can grow up to sue the nurse. And they're not suing just the hospital, they're suing the actual care provider. Which is why, there's this section in the book that says nurses laugh at birth plans in the United States. You're supposed to draw up this birth plan that says, I don't want an episiotomy, and I want light, dim lights and music. And they pass it around, they laugh. Because why should you think you're going to go against hospital protocol? Hospital protocol exists to protect hospitals and doctors and nurses from litigation. Mm-hmm. Second thing, universal health care. Because right now our system is driven by profit. Cesarean sections spike before weekends and holidays. Now, are these guys thinking, I better section this woman so I can get out to the golf links with my buddy? Not consciously, but look at the data. A cesarean section costs like $5,000, and a vaginal birth about $1,000. So there's a pure profit incentive. An anesthesiologist makes $120,000 a year. He has to, or she has to give, if only the 20% of women who really needed medication, anesthesia, got it, he couldn't make his income. He has to give it to like 80% of the women in order to be cost effective. So this is what distorts our system. Mm-hmm. Your system and that of other European countries is distorted in the other direction by budget cuts and by government saving money. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, women are not getting some of the things that they deserve because there's an effort to cut down on costs. Mm-hmm. And, of course, midwives are not getting paid properly. The third thing we need is consumer enlightenment. This is why I wrote my book. The more vocal consumers there are, mm-hmm. writing, saying, I'm going to change, what I'm looking for because I know the score, the more the market will follow that. And finally, we need disclosure laws. In 48 states, you can't find out how many cesarean sections or how many, what the outcomes are for your hospital or your practice. You can't. No way to know. And we need consumer protections that force that disclosure.
Yeah. Well, I think these are important points. However, I want to describe a little bit the partnership that exists between the midwife and the woman, and the obstetrician and the woman. And when a woman comes to you in Holland as a midwife, mm-hmm. Actually you both are committed to one goal. And the most important goal is a natural birth, a safe birth for the mother and the child, and a very good experience. Mm-hmm. And you actually make a commitment to it. Mm-hmm. And each of the partners bring in their own responsibility and their own knowledge. The midwife brings in her knowledge, and the woman brings in her responsibility, taking full responsibility for her own body and for her own process to reach the goal, a safe birth. And there is a basic trust. And in this situation, it's almost impossible to sue your midwife, right, because you're fully responsible for your own body, right, to take full responsibility for your biology, for your own steam, for your own biology. You have to take a risk, and you have to have that goal in mind, a natural birth, which you both make an appointment for. Mm-hmm. And when I read your book, I actually, it came to my mind that I thought one of the most important things I would want to give to American women as a support is to support them to actually take that responsibility for their own bodies and for their own feeling and for their own strength as a woman.
Can you be a little bit more specific about what that looks like? Because as you're talking, and I knew we'd get into it, but as you're basically, to be totally frank with you all, what happened right before we came on is that Beatrice described, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but her ideal
of childbirth, and I expressed that I found one aspect of it, particularly the expectation in Holland that a woman can really manage the pain by herself, right? And that it's a positive virtue to be able to do so. I found that from, again, granted I come from with a lot of cultural baggage of my own, but I found that unnerving. And just now when you're talking about the goal is a natural birth, if I were giving birth in Holland or if you were my midwife, safe. Okay, great. Because I would say, well, Beatrice, I am sure you're a fabulous midwife, but you and I seem to have a different idea about what is optimal in terms of what's expected of me as a birthing mother and what I expect of myself as a birthing mother.
I take your point that that's important what you're saying, but what I mean is if the goal is a safe birth, not a natural birth. A C-section is wonderful when there is a complication or when there is an emergency. An epidural is wonderful if a woman really can't take the pain and the pain actually is too agonizing, and then it works against the flow of the birth. But if you know what happens with epidurals, and that it can really arrest the birth. And when it arrests the birth, you invite a lot of intervention. And actually, then you jeopardize a safe birth. Yes. So if you really want a safe birth for your child, you should, to a certain point, actually really try to follow the pain and actually take the pain as your guide. Actually, it makes you also more in touch with your feeling.
Well, see, that's where I start. Little red flags go up in my head when you say that. But go ahead.
Okay. Well, but it's actually the pain who gives you the power to stay in charge. Because as long I will, I think, and I really think that the clue, a very important clue for American obstetrics, actually, to give back the empowerment to the American woman, is that the culture towards pain should change. Because it's nothing wrong with epidural. Don't mistake me. Because there's normal pain and there's pathological pain. And when a woman, for instance, with an incest history, or when she's battered as a child, she has a very low threshold for pain, and I think they really need the support of an epidural. Mm-hmm. But for a normal birth, in Holland, 92% of women just take it. And
but how do they feel about taking it?
I will tell you.
They want to tell me. They want to tell us.
Okay.
Can everyone hear her? Maybe would be nice. Can everyone stand up and sort of address the audience when they speak? Thank you.
I'm from Great Britain. I lived in it for 12 years now. I gave birth 2.5 years ago, and I really relate to what Beatrice says about empowerment, because I also come from a country that has a lot of hospital birth. And because of the citizenship, because of the midwives who enlightened me and taught me like a woman instead of a doctor and a gardener, I went through a very long 36-hour birth, but what I learned was that I did it myself.
Nobody else had to do it for me. It was me. And when I came out of, actually in the end I did give birth in hospital, when I came out of that whole experience, I felt so strong, and I understand what you say about pain, and with all due respect to you, but I feel if you've given a vaginal birth, the word pain is often frightening, but when you have experienced it, it's not about pain of terror and a car crash and all this. It's about one thing, giving birth to a hopefully healthy baby. So that's what I'd like to add.
That's beautiful, and I support you. Let me just clarify before we take other questions. I'm so glad you had a good experience. I have also heard from a lot of women who have given vaginal birth who have said things like, this one woman was a journalist in the Middle East, and she said there's this instrument of torture called the Assad chair in Syria, which is this heated cone, and that they sit political prisoners on this heated cone, okay? And she said, no one told me giving birth was going to be like sitting on the Assad chair, okay? So I don't object. If there were no alternative to a healthy, safe birth that was extremely painful, I would have no objection. But as a feminist, my little antennae quiver when I hear mystification and ideologizing of women's experience. I'm not saying you're doing that, but respectfully, when Beatrice says something like, the pain itself is empowering, or, that we agree on, okay. But I said something like, why can't women in Holland have told me they can't even have a Demerol, which is a kind of a pretty low-key drug to take the edge off of pain, and that they have to kind of establish that they're like an incest survivor or a rape survivor in order to get pain medication, to be taken in and to get an epidural. My ideal, and I said to Beatrice, what if there were a drug, and I think Entonox, we don't know enough about it, the gas that is sometimes given, what if there were a drug that didn't interfere with your hormones, didn't interfere with your endorphins, didn't interfere with the baby's birth, but actually took the pain away? Would you object to it? And I think we were on the point of establishing that I think you would when we came in here. And I guess I just want to be really wary of mystifying pain or mystifying anything that isn't about a woman's choice, because that might be what you want, but I don't think I want to be in pain for 36 hours. And if there's a way for me to have a choice about that, I don't want to have to prove to some Stalinist bureau of people checking that I really was traumatized enough to get pain medication. I don't mean you, but any more than I want to prove it to some Stalinist hospital administrator.
I just wanted to add something. I don't know, Naomi, how much you've heard about Holland and the incredibly long waiting lists for medical care, for operations. I have to ask myself if there is even a capacity, were Dutch women to want to be in a hospital to give birth, and if that has something to do with it.
That's interesting. So what's your question? Your question is, could it be that there is not greater pressure on the government to fund more hospitals and shorten the waiting lists because there's a reluctance to invest in more hospital places?
The other way around, there aren't enough midwives, and so more women
Right.
are having to give birth in hospitals because
Right, that's right. Because they can't give birth at home. That's right. And by the way, related to that is I think there aren't enough midwives because they're so underpaid, and if they were paid more, it would attract more women to the profession, right?
What I thought was important to say about pain is that there's a huge cultural difference between how the Dutch and the Americans in general look at pain.
It seems to be.
The Dutch won't
right.
take an aspirin unless they're at death's door.
Right.
And so it's really hard. You can't say that the Dutch system would work for Americans, I don't think,
It's
because
interesting.
I think it's a really deep and difficult to bridge cultural differences.
How fascinating. Go ahead.
Can I say something that
Yes,
might, I don't know, maybe be a solution for your difference?
Yes.
What really helped me was the trust that my midwife placed into me. That was a pain relief to me.
Oh, wonderful.
When she encouraged me and told me exactly the words I needed to hear at that particular point, I felt hopeful
Yes.
and confident. So it felt like a drug.
What did
almost.
she say to you?
Well, it was actually complicated stories. I was also induced, and the gynecologist was there, and my favorite midwife, because that's the thing. What you're saying, you have this favorite midwife, but then maybe you're going to get someone else who's on call. But she just told me when I was losing it or when I was panicking, she just said, keep breathing, or just really simple things.
Right.
So maybe that could be your kind of answer.
It's a wonderful drug, and I'm glad you mentioned that because
but most midwives, without knowing, hypnotize. They say they lower their voice, and they say go breathing, and they bring you in a kind of consciousness that just allows you to de-inhibit,
Right.
and then the hormones start flowing.
Right.
Actually, your personal morphine starts working.
See, Beatrice, what personal morphine?
No, this is physiology.
Yeah.
This is the
Okay.
normal, natural
hormones that
Yes.
play a
Yeah.
very important role
Yes.
during birth. It's pure physiology.
Right.
It's nothing. There's no mystification. If you say that Demerol is a very innocent drug,
Yes.
in Holland, Demerol.
I didn't say it was innocent.
Oh.
I said it was low key.
Low key, yeah. In Holland, it's considered very high key.
Okay.
No, but because it really gives you the feeling that you're out of control, and that it's very often given to diminish the pain, but it doesn't actually diminish the pain. It de-inhibits. It's a de-inhibitor, and actually. It can really damage the breath impulse of the baby after birth, and it's considered dangerous for the safety of the birth in Holland. So you really have to go to the hospital to get it.
Right. Okay, so respectfully, I was in labor, even though I am not of the privileged majority of women to have experienced vaginal birth. I was in many, many hours of labor. I too dilated, and I have had contractions. I did not experience the personal morphine that our body generates, and I have heard many women go through birth and labor, and they too did not experience the personal morphine that our body generates. And in fact, one of the things women tell me, if I could just finish, is that one of the reasons they love having read Misconceptions before having given birth is that they are prepared. And one of the objections I have, there's a section in my book you probably hate, which talks about childbirth activists who euphemize pain and who say, it's not contractions, they're rushes. It's not pain, it's a surge. And so women go into labor, they're like, yo! And women read this section in my book where this woman describes a real birth, and she said, it was like demons were pulling my body apart and I was being torn in two. And if you know that going in, then you can say, which is what a wonderful Belizean midwife said, who delivered 900 women in the jungle, she said, you can be warriors for yourselves. It's excruciatingly painful and you can do it, which is a different message from, respectfully, there's morphine in your body, which I didn't experience.
I totally agree
And
on this
Demerol,
point.
I took Demerol. It didn't make me feel out of control at all. It made me feel like I was not hurting so much.
Question.
I just want to say I was a labor and delivery nurse for 10 years in America. And I also delivered there and here. I had C-sections and vaginal deliveries.
Wow.
I had postpartum depression,
Wow.
everything. Anyway, I can honestly say that there's truth in both. Living here for 5 years and being married to a Dutch man with a Dutch family, there's truth in both of what both of you are saying, with the pain. But I will say that it is definitely a cultural difference, and that it comes, if you understand the Dutch, they're very Calvinistic, and in the way that they have been raised, and they're the weather, Dutch weather, it prepares you. You have to be tough, and you can't complain. That's for sure. No, but in America, it is so different the way that we look at it, and I think that's the difference. That's all I wanted to say.
Mm-hmm.
And
I really want to hear from Dutch women, though. Is it that you are feeling tough inside and you're really not experiencing excruciating pain, or yes, please, or is it that it doesn't hurt as much? You turn the little button on.
Hello?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a Dutch woman, and I have 5 children.
Wow.
2 I got naturally, which I agree went lovely, wonderful, fine. But the third was horrifying. In Holland, I got my baby here, and of course I didn't want to have an epidural. At 11:30 at night, the doctor came in. He said, listen, you want to have an epidural because you have to decide now, because otherwise the doctor for epidurals leaves the hospital and he's not going to come back for a delivery. And I was there being, I thought, listen, I did it twice. I have to do it again, I have to make it. But I was sick. I couldn't breathe. I had a terrible cold. And I thought, why didn't somebody see that I couldn't cope anymore? Why did not somebody come in and say, listen, you need an epidural, out of here, Because the fun thing is that I also got my babies with the whole family in the room. This is the Dutch great thing.
Right.
They said, this is your hotel room, everybody can be here, and all of a sudden the baby was born while my mother was there, my brother was there, my aunt was there, everybody was there. So the same thing happened at that time, but at that time I thought, I have to leave the room and nobody's going to be there with me anymore. And in the end, I should have gone. There should have been someone, and there was no one. I was number 7 in one of the rooms, and at a certain point I had 9 centimeters dilution. And some guy came in and he said, listen, I'm going to help you out. You're just going to push now. And even my water had hardly broken, so I had to push. I pushed so much that my good friend said, you could have pushed yourself a brain like one. I mean, till over my shoulders, I was red. I looked like a pig. It was unbelievable. And then, after all, the baby was out, and then I had so much pain. I said, "Take this baby away. Give me a shot. I cannot cope anymore."
Right.
And I had a symphysiolyse after this whole symphysiolyse, back and instability. How do you call that? That you cannot, that your whole.
Where was the midwife?
That wasn't there. I was
You
under a gynecologist.
You went straight to the hospital.
Yeah, I was under a gynecologist.
Okay.
So the gynecologist that was,
Yeah.
that
I
had.
understand. Yes.
And then after that, I said, I'm never going to get a baby natural anymore. This was such a dramatic experience.
Of course.
And we moved abroad, and of course there it was normal that I had an epidural. And I just remember one moment, and that was the moment that the doctor said to me, "Okay, you can push now." And I laid there, and I was remembering, of course, my former babies. So I went like, and the guy looked at me and said, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "You told me to push." But he says, "That's not pushing." He says, "Relax." And I mean, and all of a sudden the baby fell out of me, and I didn't feel a thing. And I was like, "Oh my God, this is heaven." So I don't know it anymore. I don't know who's right. I think I missed a midwife. I'm convinced I missed a midwife.
Yes.
Because there should have been somebody feeling responsible.
Yes. Well, thank you. There's some other questions here. Yes. Thank you. Yes, take the floor.
I think it's very funny to hear both stories of both cultures, but being Dutch and not having had children yet, I always feel horrified with hearing how romanticizing we're talking about giving birth the natural way. Especially my sister, she asked frequently to her midwife to give her some pain medication if she wanted that, and it was agreed that she should get it, but she didn't get it. And she was very traumatized by that, and and that's what I think about the story Beatrijs is telling us here. It's just all about, it's not just about giving birth safely, it's doing it your own way.
Right.
And, it's not about American or Dutch, but it's just, you have to, and it's not to the midwife, to anybody else, to decide.
No, I fully agree with you that there should be a choice. And that's why I'm so in favor of the partnership, where you can both actually reassure each other and then really tune and fine-tune the relationship. And then you know that your midwife will follow you and actually will respect you.
It doesn't always go like that. So that's what I want. And just wanted to also tell you one Dutch joke, who says, if the man were to have the children, no man would ever, in Holland, if the man were to have the children, there would be no children in Holland.
Oh dear.
Well,
It's quite a joke.
Yeah.
Did
you want to react?
Yeah, I did want to react. I mean, first, before you go, what reason did the midwife give for not giving your sister pain medication?
Because it wasn't medically, needed.
Indicated?
Necessary.
Necessary.
No, not necessary.
And so there's not a category of psychologically necessary for getting pain medication?
There is, actually, really there is.
Yeah.
If a woman really, if you see that the pain is, she can't cope, you as a midwife, you help her with either Demerol or an epidural.
Okay, so I'm gonna react and please.
That's then the midwife again who's deciding.
Well, can I? Yeah, let me just react to this because it's.
Both.
Well, wait a minute. I have to react to this. So, respectfully, when you say. When we're talking about pain medication and who actually can administer it and why in the context of birth in your institutions codified by your laws in Holland, it sounds like, interestingly, a mirror image of what we experience in the United States, in that I kept asking my midwives, who decides when your judgment is different from the obstetricians? And she would say, it's a partnership. There's mutual decision-making. You really collaborate. Exactly your words. But when it came down to it, there was a set of laws and protocols in which she was less of a decision-maker than the obstetrician. I am uncomfortable with you saying it's a partnership when in real life there's a set of laws here in Holland and a set of protocols in which someone has more power to decide than someone else, and the midwife has more power to decide than the woman. That is not okay.
No, There's no
And
because
not being able to sue if something does go wrong.
Pardon me?
And not being able
You
to
can't sue?
They don't sue in Holland.
Well,
There's
they
no
may not,
tradition.
but it's not that they can't.
There's no tradition of suing. But
Maybe there should be. You know? I mean, is it in the United States? And then I'll shut up. But one thing I had to say was, I'm wondering, since I've been out of the United States for so long, do you get cases where in the room, in the delivery room, that the lawyer is present? Her lawyer is present? No?
No.
Okay, not yet.
You're joking, right?
No, I really wondered.
Yeah.
Before I give the next...
I'm glad I would not want my lawyer to be present in the delivery room.
Before I give the next one the floor, I just want to say very shortly, there's this wonderful research done in Holland, in the University of Nijmegen and Massachusetts. And 600 women in Nijmegen were asked, and 600 women in Massachusetts in pregnancy, 6 weeks before birth, and they were asked, do you think you can cope with the pain, and would you need pain relief? Mm-hmm. And the Dutch women would say for 97%, I think it will be excruciating pain, but I think I will cope.
Right.
The American women said, I think it will be very agonizing, and I think I really need some pain relief.
Right.
6 weeks later, interview again, and then 92% of Dutch women said it was awful, excruciating pain, but I could cope.
Right.
And only that amount needed
they had no choice.
needed pain relief. And the Massachusetts women, just the opposite.
Yes.
They said it was horrifying, I couldn't cope, and 97% had epidurals.
Right.
So if you look at that, and of course you will have everywhere where people work are failures. Of course there are bitchy midwives who misuse their power. And there are obstetricians who misuse their power as well. But what I my point is that the attitude towards pain actually decides if there is a use of pain relief or not.
But that is not the only judgment. It shouldn't be the only judgment of whether something is a successful birth or not. I mean, let's look at that data. And I want to say something else about this before we go to all of you. Okay. Now, forgive me for being really controversial in saying this, but I have to. When you're talking about, well, you know, there is a category for psychological distress, and it's this category if you see she really can't cope, and there is a category if she's been traumatized by sexual abuse, and there is a category if she's been traumatized by incest. You know what that sounds like? It sounds like what you had to do before abortion was legal. You had to prove I was raped. You had to say I can't handle it psychologically. I can't handle it mentally. And you had to prove it to a medical panel. And I'm just
talking about safe birth.
Yeah, I'm not saying
that's
these two
the
things
issue.
are the same thing. We're also talking about ideology.
No, it comes down to safe birth and try to have a birth with the least of intervention, because every intervention is a potential risk for the baby. And I think if you really are a feminist, I think at least you have to feel responsible for the safety of your baby.
Absolutely.
And of the safety of your own body.
Yes. Well,
and
if you're a real feminist, you also have to respect women's choices.
Oh, absolutely. But what is, you say choice, but what do you want? Do you want a safe birth, or you want to have a choice?
Well, actually, I want both.
Yes, but...
And they're not... Yeah, okay, but you know what? So let's agree to disagree on this, and let's go back to... And please let me stress, I'm not drawing a parallel between abortion and a safe birth. I'm saying if we really respect women, women decide. Yeah.
I want to...
She can't hear you.
Hi, my name is Katerina. Naomi, I'd like to ask you a very personal question at this point, because... You know, it's, of course, women have to decide, but the whole thing is, how do you feel as a woman, having given birth and not being there and having had a cesarean? What did it do really to your consciousness?
Right. That's a very good question, and I've written, it's fascinating to me that I'm kind of in this oppositional relationship right now here, because we actually, if you read my book, we totally agree on 90% of everything except this. But this is important, because this is... you know, about how people see becoming a mother. Okay, what I wish is that if I had to have a cesarean section, it would be in a country like Holland where I would know it was medically necessary.
Yeah.
But if God forbid those cesareans were necessary, I have no problem with it.
Yeah.
I certainly wish that the standard of care for midwifery skills and midwifery empowerment in America were influenced by Dutch practice. Having said that, how do I feel as a woman who, when I said I need help with pain, got it? I feel good about that. How do I feel? What I'm hearing from having listened to women in Holland and America is that people get invested in whatever difficulties they've had to live through, and they give it meaning. So just like women in America are going, what? You shrew! How could you say that my cesarean was not necessary? And the initial response to my book was, don't tell me this. I don't want to know that there's anything wrong with the medical system. By the same token, understandably, I can imagine Dutch women saying to a researcher, well, yes, of course I could cope with the pain, because I did cope with the pain. You know, what are you going to do? You cope with the pain because you have to cope with the pain. And we know that...
No, but the thing is what
she... Yeah. Well, you have a lot of good supports to cope with the pain, but I still would like to be in a culture that gives me pain medication if I ask for it without my having to, like, negotiate with the state, and also gives me supportive midwifery without my having to negotiate with institutions of the medical lobby. That shouldn't be too much to ask. Hello, we're women. It's the 21st century.
But what I think one should realize, from the moment you choose pain relief and epidural, you totally give away. But Demerol is we talk about epidural. In America, it's about 90. How much percent?
Like Entonox. They use Entonox.
No, but if you choose for an epidural, you just totally give away the autonomy of birth. You just, from that moment on, you're high risk. You don't feel. It becomes intellectually. Yes. You jeopardize the health of your baby and yourself.
Well, first let me say there's so many people waiting to ask. You and I both know, and you know from having read my book, that I'm a critic of epidurals as routine.
I find your discussion very interesting because really what each of you is talking about is a lack of choice that exists on both sides.
Exactly right.
As an American woman who has given birth, I was on high risk. I had a high-risk pregnancy. I was preeclamptic and had a premature infant. But my sister-in-law did not have the choice, despite the fact of trying to negotiate with her physician and the nurses of what her birth plan was.
Right.
And she, this was in the United States. And unfortunately, she's not with us today.
Aww.
And it's really unfortunate.
By that, do you mean she is no longer...
She's dead.
I'm sorry. She died in childbirth?
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Now, is that because she did not get the intervention she needed?
She had too much intervention. It was a situation where she was told that she absolutely had to have the baby immediately, despite the fact that she wanted to, wait out the labor and really work with the pain and really try to get herself in a position where she could have the baby without any intervention. The doctor, it was a situation where it was a holiday.
Right.
She had a holiday party to go to, so she administered, and I know physicians in this room are going to cringe when they hear this, but they use misoprostol, which is Cytotec, another common name for this particular drug, which is not prescribed anywhere in the world to women. Certainly not for labor. It is used for medical abortion in certain situations.
God.
But because of this intervention, unfortunately, she's not here today.
I'm so sorry.
And there was a second point that I wanted to make in terms of working with midwives. I find it remarkable that the notion that a woman is supposed to, and I hear your point about feeling the pain and sort of letting your body's morphine take over, whatever that is. I did not experience that personally. But there is a notion that women have to take that pain, that it is something that a woman has to take.
Right.
And I've worked with midwives in Africa where, it is a shame to your family if you cry out in pain during childbirth.
That's right.
And, I think they're both extremes to the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Holland is being set as an example for America, like you said. But let me say first, I've had three children in natural childbirth, one of them in America. And what strikes me when I got the baby in America was that the doctor said, what do you want? And I said, well, I just want this
a baby.
In a normal way. And you had all the choices. So it was really like I was the consumer. So I did what I always did. I did the same as I did in Holland, so I got the baby on a natural way. But still, I don't think that this system will turn over America, but it will be the other way around. That the things that are happening in America will happen here.
And I understand that's
just
happening.
not because I think that it's good, because I like it the Dutch way, that people will be afraid of pain, and our births are the whole process of childbirth is getting more and more special. Women get only 1 or 2 children. So 20 years ago they had 5 children, and after the 3rd, 4th child, it was really nothing. You did it in an hour, and it was not something to be upset about. But now every child is a 1 or a 2nd child, and the mothers are getting older. They are in their late 30s, so they have to go to the gynecologist anyhow. So no, they don't have to, but they will be. There are just statistically more difficult pregnancies than when everybody's in their 20s. So the births are getting more special, and all people who don't have children, they say, why are you so crazy to get through the pain in this modern times in the 21st century? There's no need to have the pain. Although I agree with you that the moment you get the pain relievers or the drugs, you lose the power. I agree with you, but still they will be too afraid of pain, so everything will go the American way. I think so.
What is the clue of your question or of your comment?
Well, the clue is that at this discussion, Holland is being set as an example for America, but it will be the other way around.
Only when we let it happen.
But it will happen. There's
I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I'm not convinced either. You have a strong tradition of I'm sorry, you have a reaction.
Yes.
Read What to Expect When You're Expecting, and I read Beatrijs' books, and I read about 20 other pregnancy books, and I really liked Beatrijs' book the best. Anyway, my pregnancy went on, and I didn't know what to do, I was with 1 foot in America and 1 foot in Holland, and finally, when it really approached, I decided that when I had to do my primordial scream, I wanted to scream in Dutch. So I went over here. And I also have to say that I'm the kind of person who really, I didn't want to take any drugs. I wanted to do it the natural way. My primary concern was that I didn't want my baby to get any drugs. I thought it would be a bad start for anyone to come into this world stoned. So some people might disagree, but then I went with this practice in Amsterdam with this midwife, and my labor started, and I immediately had my contractions 5 minutes apart, which is very strange, like exactly 5 minutes apart. So my midwife, she thought it was very strange too, didn't know what to do, but she said, well, just wait. And I was thinking about the story that Beatrijs started with about doing it alone. Well, I wasn't too happy. Anyway, I waited about 7 hours, and that's another thing. I think the Dutch are kind of proud. We are not easy to... we don't easily acknowledge that, I really wanted to call the midwife, but I thought I needed to be tough. Yet this was my hour, and this was my first child, and I was scared and everything. But anyway, so 7 hours later, my contractions had been 5 minutes apart, all the time, 5 minutes apart. The midwife came, and she saw that I was only 1 centimeter dilated, which was horrible for me. So she said, you know what, this looks terrible. Why don't we bring you to the hospital and we medicate you? So she offered me and we put you to sleep, because this could take very, very long. But I was going to be tough. I said, no, I don't want the medication, and The midwife said, it can also happen just, in the next hour it could happen. So I was going to go for it. Well, it took me, after 35 hours, I was finally completely dilated, and then they broke my water, and I was in the great, what you just described, the stool, because I had the same theory. I read Beatrijs books. I wanted to help the gravity and everything. I hated the stool, Yeah.
Why?
I had known
about the stool.
The stool was terrible. It was very uncomfortable. It hurt your ass. It's just not happening. So then, the other thing I had read, the shower is going to be so great. And I had actually wanted a water birth, but my Amsterdam midwife didn't do water birth. So I was in the bathtub, but I hated the shower too. So anyway.
What did you like?
Well, this is what is going to be the funny part. I mean, the one position that I liked is the position that you just described. It was on my back. So, my whole point is, I finally, after 37 hours, they had to bring me. I was in the midst of my real contractions, and they had to bring me to the hospital, which was horrifying. And then when I came to the hospital, I was hoping that somebody came with a wheelchair, but instead I was dropped in front of the in front of the emergency entrance, and nobody was there, and I was there in the middle of my contractions. So it was a nightmare.
So
and
what happened?
The midwife was parking her car, So I got to the hospital, and meanwhile my husband lost me because he was with the assistant midwife, and midwife was calling all the different hospitals, and nobody had place. So my husband was gone to another hospital, and so I finally got there, and then 5 minutes later I was in the bed, and I felt all the, the IVs in my arms, and I thought, fuck, this is not what I wanted.
Right,
I wanted to have empowerment, control. I wanted to give birth at home. I had my whole nice home with candles and my favorite music and my birthing stool. And so then they made me push another 2 hours, and then finally the midwife said, okay, they induced it extra more, and then after 40 hours, they cut me, and they, what do you say? They needed the vacuum extraction. So out came this beauty here. And she was 9 pounds, so it was no wonder that I couldn't get her out. But the thing that the end of this story is that I wanted to do everything the midwives' way. I was all for the midwives. I worked with them. I was doing it the natural way, and I had not a very good time. I still feel kind of strange about the whole thing because I wanted to do it myself, and in the end, I know that without the hospital and without the doctor, then I have to. Right after the baby was born, I had lost so much blood, about 1.5 liters, and I was so happy that I was in a hospital, and I could have died if I would have been at home.
Yes.
And so, I want to say that whether America or Holland or midwife or not, each birth is completely personal.
Absolutely.
And you can't. That's the only thing you have to do. It's going to be different for everyone. My mother. She got me in 3 hours, and with no pain or anything. So that's not a.
Well, I just want to honor you and just cheer you and your beautiful baby. And when your friend was holding the baby up and we were cheering, and you were narrating the story, which is like a war story, really, with a wonderful outcome. I mean, this is what society should be. Mothers, we haven't even talked about the low status of mothers, which is a big subject of misconceptions, but mothers don't get this enough. There aren't enough public spaces where 300 people cheer you for what you did, and you hold up the baby as the ultimate good. It's not a soccer trophy, it's the baby. And you're just like, yeah!
Well, thank you for that, but I also think that at the same time, the whole time when I was giving birth and without the medication, what I was thinking was every woman in the world almost has done this. It's not so special. So if everybody can do it...
Well, it's special. It's
so can I.
Not so,
I know.
Yeah, it's not undoable. Well,
and about the pain...
You're not alone.
Yeah, about the pain, it was horrible, 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 but I do have to say that as soon as they're born, you forget about it completely.
That's true. Well, how wonderful for you. And, don't feel funny about your birth because, what you just said it yourself so eloquently, every birth is different. Every woman is different. And, someone said, how am I traumatized by my cesarean sections? I wish I hadn't had them, but they were my births and they brought my children. And I think that what we need to do is throw out the scripts, God bless the births that we have, and may we, have the freedom to have the right births for us. Yeah.
Well,
Should we take one more question? And,
yes.
Yeah.
I was struck by your comment that you get quivery whenever there's a mystification of pain or perhaps vaginal birth over the evil of cesarean.
No, I think vaginal birth is better than cesarean unless cesarean is medically necessary.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's still a certain amount of mystification to that, I think. But what I really wanted to do was ask, and it's kind of side note, but I was really struck when you said how at 4 months you saw an ultrasound and it completely changed your image of what motherhood was. We can imagine when you became pregnant, when did you become a mother? When did you enter motherhood? And how did that enter into this whole process, which we've been talking about the pain of 36 hours, but not the
we haven't talked about
experience
motherhood much, have we? Right.
9 months plus a few years after that.
Right. Well, obviously I'll have to come back to Amsterdam, right, and come back to pick up with part 2, and all of you, I hope, very soon, to talk about motherhood at greater length. But that is a really good question because, part of why I felt moved to tears when, we were cheering the baby. I was in that soccer rally in the center of the square, and all of these people were, woo, 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 Ajax, and I was thinking, is that right? Did I mispronounce that? Ajax?
Ajax.
Ajax. Sorry. I didn't want to talk to one of those guys to find out how to pronounce it. They looked a little too big and drunk. But you were there. I wish I'd known you then. But I want a world in which, at some point women go march, 500,000 women in that square going, babies, 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 and, the babies are on that big screen, and, the whole country is cheering, the babies, and childbirth, yeah, we did it, and women like that are up on the balcony, you had your whole, football team up on the balcony, the women with the real birth stories, I did 36 hours of labor, so, whoa, yeah. So anyway, got a little carried away there. I forgot what I was going to say. She asked me, when did I become a mother? Yes, such a beautiful question, because I feel like I'm still becoming a mother. And that okay, we haven't even talked about this, but this is something Dutch women have said yes to. That, I said earlier, motherhood is supposed to be this thing you naturally do. But when you look at a cathedral, we don't say, oh, those men who built that cathedral, they're just doing what their hormones dictate. They're just naturally wired to build cathedrals. We go, what a work of art, what a work of human effort and will and conscience and beauty. And that's how I want us to think about motherhood, and fatherhood. It's not just this natural thing you do. It's also every day that you put the toddler's shoe on, just at that point when the toddler learns how to ball her little foot so you can't get the shoe on, and you don't hold the toddler upside down and shake her, right, when she learns how to throw her food across the room, Every time any parent in this world takes a deep breath and thinks, I could walk out the door right now or something worse, right? And then comes back and talks lovingly to the child. That is not nature. That is ethics. That's conscience. That's human effort. I think it's deeper than love, I don't think even mother love gets at the human effort and discipline and will and, sorry? Effort? Oh, agape. Yeah. It's love and discipline. It's love and self-restraint. It's love and a higher consciousness at work. It's love. It's not something that doesn't take effort. And I want us to applaud the effort. It's like a cathedral when you are a good parent, a good mother to a child. You've built a beautiful thing, and it's not just because you're wired to do so. It's because you've made choice. You've made choices, ethical choices. So I want to I want to say that. So I'm becoming a mother every day. You know, every day I try to call on the better angels of my nature and think, you know, this is forever. Let me give her enough. Let me give her more than enough. I'm becoming a mother more and more.
Yeah, and living your life, and by giving an example too.
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because in the past we defined good mothering as emptying yourself out to give to the child. But I'd like us to have a feminist redefinition of good mothering, that it's having such an abundance of yourself that you have enough, you have more than enough for yourself and your child. Yeah.
I wanted to thank you for what you said in the, I think I read it in the HP De Tijd, an article about your book, because you said exactly what I felt. The relationship with your partner changes so much. We used to be equals, or maybe even it was the other way around. And I really hope that you, in making going through your process, of course, with your children and your partner, that you will maybe in a couple of years write a book about how this develops, because I struggle with that, not with the discipline of feeding and raising my children, but with how to balance this with your sexual and intimate relationship with your partner.
Right. So what, can you be a little more specific? Because I know this is something a lot of women and men in the room relate to.
He says, nothing changed since we had the children. I don't spend anything more on sports than I did before. Well, I don't spend anything anymore on sports, whereas I used to do it all the time. I don't go I don't go more often to bars with my friends. I don't go anymore.
Oh, wow.
You know, I mean, it looks like men want to go on and women sort of give up everything.
Well, what does he say when you discuss this with him off the record?
He understands, and then he says you have to do more for yourself, which ultimately comes to leaving your children with sitters.
Right.
And it can be good for tonight, but not for every night.
Right.
He can, but he wanted to play golf this afternoon, so we have a sitter now at home.
Right. And what does he say when you explain that you want... This is, by the way, there's this conversation in my book.
I read something in the article that you said you have to go into negotiations about what you implicitly sort of thought you had agreed upon.
Right.
And now you have to negotiate about it.
Yes.
It's like it's somebody different.
It's somebody different, yeah. This is a very common... I'm sorry to say it's a very common...
It's a side effect that I don't really like about mothering, but...
Well, it's not, but you know what, that's interesting. It's not about mothering. It's not about mothering. It's about men not being willing to change.
It's about having a relationship.
Yeah.
But other than that, I would really...
Can a man maybe answer?
She has something to say.
Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
And
also you say, well, I don't want to sit there, so I stay at home.
No,
but you also say, I want to go out, and you don't go out.
Maybe it helps to say what I said to him. If you would go about your job, he has a responsible job in a hotel. If you would go about your job the way you go about your part of doing our household things and the children things, you would be fired immediately.
Yes, that's right.
You don't take any responsibility. You do as I tell you, but you don't take any responsibility
and
yourself.
What does he say to that?
And he says, well, you do everything so you know it a lot better, and you have to tell me.
That one. Yes, we've heard that one. Yes.
That's the easy way out. But, I mean, we're working on it. But you need a lot of love to go through
I really recommend that you go into couples counseling as soon as possible.
I'll tell him.
I really recommend that. I do, because actually... women more than men initiate divorce. The number one reason women initiate divorce is not infidelity or domestic violence. It is that they cannot stand the inequality around child work and housekeeping.
I can imagine because the sex doesn't bother me at all.
Right.
We don't have sex; it doesn't bother me at all.
Right, I bet.
We don't have equality.
Right.
Okay,
right.
There's a man who wants to
say someone wants to speak to that. Yes.
The thing is, we men often think that we cannot be replaced in our jobs. which is absolutely, it's a thing, it's a responsibility thing. And I remember when we had our first child, I made the decision to at least take care for the children apart from the weekends for one day, one working day. And in the beginning, in the first months, I was completely frustrated after that day because I found myself building with blocks all the time. Yes. And I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Yeah, but in the end, it was very rewarding and it worked out.
So you need to
it's
talk
a responsibility.
To her husband.
What's that?
You need to talk to her husband.
I need to talk to her husband, yes.
Yes, you do. Well, I mean, I just want to say one more thing. Women often feel they can't negotiate from a position of strength because they are not as rich as their husbands at this point when the baby comes, right? So one of the strongest things I advocate is before you get pregnant, make sure you have a separate bank account with your own money in it, even if it's just enough to pay for a week to stay at a hotel. Because if you can't walk out the door, and I say this with love in my heart, if you can't walk out the door, you cannot negotiate from a position of strength for what you need.
And I agree on that point, but it's also very important to negotiate during pregnancy and not the first year after birth, because then you're so tired and then it's very likely that you get distress and disputes.
I would say negotiate before you get pregnant, because you're so vulnerable once you're pregnant.
Yeah, even before maybe.
Before you marry. No, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to change the subject a little bit, but hopefully it'll give us an opportunity to wrap things up. First of all, thank you, Naomi, for using your public voice to talk about something that obviously is a personal and a very important issue for most of us.
Thank you.
My father is an obstetrician gynecologist. He has practiced for 35 years in the U.S. He's a professor emeritus at Johns Hopkins. He teaches obstetrics. He's just retired because it's no fun anymore.
Oh.
He has found, and I think he would probably agree with your 4 points, that he's not able to practice his profession and his vocation, which is what it really is. He went into the practice of obstetrics because he didn't want to work with sick people.
Right.
He wanted to work with healthy, happy women. What would you suggest is a way to bring all of these personal voices together to create the public awareness that is necessary to change that culture in the U.S. and to make sure that it doesn't happen in Holland?
Right. What a good question. And first, please pass on to your dad, my appreciation and gratitude. He sounds like the kind of obstetrician that we need these days, and it's a shame that the good ones are being driven out of the business, and the ones who stay face such a hard time, because they do. The good ones who stay face such a hard time. I have an answer for that, fortunately. Anne Crittenden, who wrote The Price of Motherhood, which, for those of you who are not familiar with it, was a book that talked about the economic costs of becoming a mother, and I have started an organization called Mothers, which stands for Mothers Ought to Have Equal Rights. And the reason we've done that is that in the United States, with our political system, which is driven by money, only a lobby with a huge membership and a lot of money can force politicians to deliver an agenda. That's why, for instance, the gun lobby, which is rich and has many members, drives legislation. That's why the AARP, the Association for Retired People, drives legislation. I worked for Al Gore, and I saw up close how even if a candidate for president really believes in in giving mothers what they need, he or she can't provide it because mothers don't have a lobby, and they don't have a lobby here in Holland either. I looked at your Dutch newspaper's description of the platform of all of your political parties. There's no mother's agenda. There's a green agenda. The environment gets more representation than mothers do, and fathers in Holland.
And there are some things wrong in Holland that need to be fixed, like, lines for daycare and so on and so forth, as well as glass ceiling issues. So when we have the power of 75 million American mothers signed up with us, which in the internet age should not be hard, we will be able to hold politicians' feet to the fire to deliver the wish list that I offer you at the back of the book. Everything from decent prenatal care to reform of the medical system to forced disclosure of intervention rates to real flex time, real paternity benefit, incentives for men and women, as well as women to take paternity leave and maternity leave, which is something you need here in Holland as well. The whole wish list. Right now, politicians in Holland and in Britain and America can't give mothers what they need because it's expensive, and your politicians are more indebted to the business lobby, whose money they think it is, right? The business lobby doesn't want women to get what they need because it costs money. And politicians here are indebted to them because we don't have a voice. When you start your mother's pressure group, right? And who here is going to organize that? You will. Thank you. All right, Beatrice. All right. Well, I encourage all of you to sign the paper that will be outside where we're selling books. Hello, bookstore people. I know you'll put some pieces of paper out there. So every woman and man in this room who believes in this can sign up, sign your email address. This is how we started. And Beatrice will head this. And those of you who want to help her and work with her and support her, or maybe I shouldn't say head, I should say initiate this, and you'll create an organization and hold politicians' feet to the fire here in Holland as well.
This lobby is just being initiated by the Royal Dutch College of Midwives. And one of the political lobbies will be a year pregnancy leave instead of 3 months.
That's good.
Yes.
For men as well as women.
Well, for both.
For both genders.
They can make a choice.
They can make a choice. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to make one other point about the cultural difference.
Last question.
Yes. You shouldn't forget this is a country where I've heard people have root canals sometimes without any anesthesia. I'm not saying
she says no
a lot that everybody does, but I know this happens. I don't think there's another country in the world where you see this happening unless somebody's purposefully torturing you. But I have two questions. Yeah. You said that any intervention can be potentially damaging to the child, so therefore it's preferable that a woman go through the pain because the epidural or painkillers or whatever.
I didn't say that.
No, so my question is actually more for her. Because I don't think that, unless that's really true, I don't see why childbirth should be painful. It's almost like a glorification of pain. So my question is, what are the statistics, since there are so many interventions in American childbirth and there's so much of a lack of intervention in Dutch childbirth, what are really the statistics? Are they much lower in complications due to interventions? Because the proof is in the pudding.
Yes. She's right that it is more dangerous to intervene. She's right.
Yeah? So are the statistics, do statistics prove that?
Actually, there's been scientific evidence for that. Yes.
And my other question, it more or less has to do with that. We shouldn't forget that nowadays, in the Western world, it's very rare, or much rarer than decades ago, that a woman will die of childbirth.
Right.
But what happens when a woman chooses to have the child at home and there are complications? Is that not a bit irresponsible? What if there's an unforeseen complication with a child that could have been helped immediately if the birth had taken place in the hospital?
I can answer very shortly. It's only safe to give birth in a system where hospitals are nearby and a good transport system, good ambulances, good roads, and the midwife makes a screening between pathology and physiology, and only the healthy group of women may give birth at home. And then in that healthy group, if a complication occurs, there is no problem whatsoever to drive in time to a hospital.
And somebody had a story that they were asked whether they wanted the epidural right now because otherwise the guy's going to go home. So is that not to me that would seem kind of scary that I might need an epidural at some point or a cesarean, and by the time they find out that I need a cesarean,
well, the surgeon hasn't gone home.
The person that's going to operate.
No, the surgeon hasn't gone home.
Yeah, in Holland, only 8% of women will have an epidural. That means that a lot of anesthesiologists are either not experienced enough, and they don't want to. They don't have a lot of experience. It's really true, and they don't want to actually be disturbed in the night for birth. And
but that shouldn't be the
and
woman's problem.
actually, this is the cultural situation at the moment.
Let me just back Beatrice up to, you should know that it actually is safer statistically to give birth at home than in the hospital. Among other things, hospitals are full of germs. You're more likely to have things like
hospitals are supposed to be among the most dangerous places.
Right.
Anyway,
but you should also know that that when you say that there are dangers for interventions, that is true for epidurals. But I have yet to see the data that you're citing that there are dangers for Demerol and Entonox.
Well, that's actually more what I meant.
And finally, just to conclude, because we need to wrap it up, I was a little nervous when we had a leisurely drive, when this woman had the baby with a low heartbeat, and the midwife called 2 separate hospitals that couldn't take her, and then finally hit gold with the third one, and then we ran into the traffic jam, and and no one else was flipping out in the car, but I was flipping out. And I think it would be lovely for Holland to devote its resources and energy to a situation where no midwife, no woman with complications, because there must be situations where women do and babies do suffer unfortunate side effects because they are too far from the hospital, especially if you have waiting lists and not enough staff on call.
I'm afraid we have to interfere. Sorry?
Problems with Dutch healthcare is that there aren't enough ICU beds for children in Holland. So
so now I want 2 extra questions. I'm afraid.
I'm not Dutch and I'm not American, but there are a lot of foreign women in Holland, especially in Amsterdam, and we didn't talk about that. And through my experience, I was active inside a Women's Global Network for Reproductive Rights and in foreign centers for foreign women.
Can you be
for
quick
empowerment.
because we want to close up?
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Most of these women felt the midwives' power that they have as a sort of violence, so they put them to be very aware before having a child, to discuss very heavily about an epidural or about being taken to the hospital, because when you said that, the women were very healthy, they can stay at home. But most of the women, being older than 30, I heard terrible tales about their giving birth. So, and feeling that this, what I liked a lot, you started with a big, wow, we are in Holland, wonderful, but you have been very critical. And
my own country.
Yes. But this is also very important. That the difference, the cultural difference, are very important. And the midwives, the Dutch midwives.
Maybe you can ask Naomi the question after I close off, because I think a lot of people have to go to a train or. I'm sorry. Yes, but it's already after 10, and I promised that we would close off at 9:30. I'm afraid.
Outside. And if there are anyone else who wants to continue the discussion, let's do it outside. And thank you.
Actually, because I just wanted to thank everybody here, and we never had babies in the crowd. We never had so much discussion, and I really like it. But I'm afraid we have to be strict because this is a church, and I want people. I want people to be able to get a drink and talk privately with Naomi, buy the book, and I want to, before you all go and buy the books, I want to thank Naomi, I want to thank Beatrijs, I want to thank you all, and I want a big thanks for the Arbeiderspers, Naomi's Dutch publisher, who made this possible.
I would like to thank Cosmos uitgevers en boekimporter van Ditmar, who also supported us. And as I said earlier, they will sign the books. There will be drinks outside, and we put questionnaires on all your chairs. We would be very grateful if you could fill them in and drop them off at the John Adams Institute information stand. And you can also sign up there for our next lectures with Barbara Kingsolver, Jonathan Spence, and Norman Mailer. Thank you so much, and have a safe trip home. Bye-bye.